You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome Thomas R. Connor, a longtime Texas trial lawyer and the author of From Cotton Fields to Courtrooms. Thomas's story spans humble beginnings, growing up on a West Texas farm, decades of high-stakes litigation, iconic courtroom battles, and deeply personal moments that shaped not only his legal career, but his life. This isn't just a book about the law. It's about resilience, ethics, justice, and what it really takes to survive and thrive in over 45 years of the practice. Thomas, great to have you on. How are you?
I'm great today, and thank you. It's an honor for you to have me on your show.
Oh, for sure. Congratulations on your book. You just told me that you got your first copy in your hands. Do you want to hold it up? Just show it to us?
Yeah, it's actually, I've looked at it on the computer for so long.
Right.
You actually get a hard copy last night. It was a real rush.
Real rush, yeah.
Because in fact, I reread it today as this is the author's copy to see if there's any further corrections. And thankfully, after probably having reread most of this book 5,000 times, there were no errors. So I was pleased.
Yeah, what an interesting thing to do after such a cool career. I got through some of the book as best as I could. I can't say the whole thing, but I definitely I recommend it to people who you're out in Texas and you just had such a great career, and you talk about law school, you talk about a lot of different things. So I really appreciated it and being able to check it out. So let's start with your early life. You grew up in a small farming community in rural West Texas. So tell us exactly where you're from and what growing up there was like.
Well, I grew up in a small town of 12,000 people. My dad was the Texaco distributor there, but where I grew up has got an interesting story.
What was the name of it?
The town is called La Mesa. It should be pronounced La Mesa,
yep,
which is Spanish for the table because it's very flat out there.
Gotcha.
But in the early days, that was buffalo country, and it's where the feared Comanche roamed. And the way the Comanche they got rid of the Comanche was that essentially the buffalo hunters came in and killed all the buffalo. And this beautiful grassland in the 1930s was taken over by farmers who tilled it. And then we had the incredible sandstorm of the 30s. And even as a child, when I was there, the sand would still blow to the point that one time Dad had to take us into town and stay in a motel for 3 days.
Wow.
So it was a wonderful place to grow up. And a lot of people, they look back in their college and high school days and they were miserable. I had a great time.
Yeah. I honestly, Tom, I didn't get that from the book. I got that from the book that you had a good time. Some people sort of they want to sort of draw empathy on themselves. But I think your book was a really positive sort of obviously you had a lot of there were things in your life that happened that were out of your control. But I didn't get the point that you were trying to draw empathy from a lot of, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
It's kind of like one of the reviewers said, being a lawyer and talking about my cases, I talked about cases that I lost.
Right.
It's, some of these lawyer books, you pick it up and read about their cases, you think, well, they're Superman. They've never lost a case in their life. Well, I lost my share, and some of them were very interesting. And so I put that in the book.
Well, I think, and going back to the empathy thing, maybe it's just that you were kind of a positive person, a little bit of a happy guy. If I'm wrong, let me know.
No, I had great parents. I had a wonderful time growing up. I had some very interesting experiences. As a young guy, I was a major market disc jockey in top 40 radio in Houston and Austin, which was a ton. Actually, the best. It was a better job than being a lawyer.
And you were a paper boy too. That led you into the disc jockey. So
yeah,
wait,
I was a paper boy we lived in Houston for the years when I was in junior high, and I had a paper route, and Hurricane Carla, who was no
right?
lady, roared
She
up the
was no lady. You
freeway.
said that in the book.
Yeah.
I saw that line. Yep.
Yeah, and anyway, I thought the route manager would give paper boys a reprieve, but during the eye of the hurricane passing over, I was throwing papers,
Yeah.
which was crazy, and it was.
Yeah.
But no, and I had other fun things that I did. I was fortunate. I drove 6 girls around Europe when I was 19 in a Volkswagen bus.
No,
And
that's remarkable. I mean, I was I was trying to envision that in my head, how you guys were just like, you had your friends started a business where at first they were flying people out to, you were flying people out, but then you took a bus.
when I was in college, it was very expensive to fly to Europe.
Right.
And my friend Oliver Hurd, who was a brilliant man, he started a charter service where you could fly charter flights if you belonged to a certain group, like be a University of Texas student. And student travel flew hundreds of people to Europe. And part of that, we started the Volkswagen bus trip where a college guy could drive 6 girls around Europe in a VW bus.
It's unbelievable. So
And I will tell you a funny anecdote. I drove across East Germany twice into Berlin. And the second time I had 6 Tridels from UT on my bus. And in those days, there were 2 requirements to be a Tridel. You had to be drop dead good looking and blonde. And so I knew that all these, the first time I went through, they pulled the luggage and put a mirror under the bus and all that. And I thought, I've got 6 gorgeous girls in this bus, and these boys are full of testosterone, the soldiers. And so I told the girls, I said, be real friendly when we get out of the bus. Well, they started handing them candy and kissing them on the cheeks. And about a minute later, the sergeant comes out of his hut and points at me, the girls, the bus, and the Autobahn, and we were gone. So,
when I was reading the story about being in a fraternity, when you were about to like tell us what fraternity you were in, I'm like, man, I hope this guy was in the same fraternity, or I hope I was in the same fraternity as him. But I wasn't. But that's awesome. I loved hearing the stories. But I want to go back to like working and growing up on the farm. Like, did you actually work it? I know the books. Tell me about the book title. Like, how did you come to the title? Did you work in?
Well, the book title is from cotton fields to courtrooms.
Right.
And I grew up in a small town, and when I came to Houston, I went to law school at the University of Houston, and I took to it. I've been in Houston ever since then. Houston's been very good to me.
Sure.
And my practice of law. And I was fortunate early on in my career. I was hired by a lady named Priscilla Davis, and her husband was a man named Cullen Davis, and he's the richest man ever tried for murder.
Wow.
He and Priscilla were separated going through their divorce, and he filed a motion. Their mansion was, I can't remember how many thousand square feet, but during the divorce, she was awarded the mansion, which really upset Cullen.
Yeah.
And he went back to court trying to get control of the mansion, and instead of getting control of the mansion, her support was increased.
Really?
And that night
it's always a risk. I mean, when you do.
Yeah, he came to the mansion, and she returned home with her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And Cullen walks out of the laundry room. Well, first off, she walks in the house and sees blood smeared down the stairwell to the basement.
Wow.
And she knows that whoever's there wants her to go down in the basement, so she does not. So she walks around, and Cullen comes out of the utility room with a maid's afro wig on and a gun in a plastic bag, and just says, "Tie," like they're bumping into each other, and he shoots her. And she falls, and he thinks she's dead. Her boyfriend comes down the stairs. He murders him.
Really?
And about that time, there's a car pulling up. So he walks away, and Priscilla thinks he thinks I'm dead, and so she gets out of the house, and he ends up shooting another young couple, and she makes her way out of the house to the neighborhood, and Cullen is charged with murder, and he literally is the richest man ever tried for murder. The case was moved to Amarillo. He was an oil heir, and Richard Racehorse Haynes, who was a very famous criminal defense lawyer in Texas, was his lead counsel and got him a not guilty. And so Priscilla, when she hired me, she was very afraid of Cullen. She we ended up with her getting $7 million in her divorce, which in today's money is about $25 million.
Okay. Wow.
And I advised her. I said, "You've got to invest this money to save, to make sure that you're taken care of." And against my advice, and after interviewing money managers at my recommendation, the scammer got a hold of her, and she gave him money because he was going to invest in antique Rolls Royces and silver.
Wow.
And of course, I knew how this movie would end, and I tried to talk her out of it. And at age 59, Priscilla died of breast cancer in a one-bedroom apartment in Dallas.
Wow. Okay. That's some story.
Well, and there was another story that I was involved. It's interesting. I get in these divorce cases, and they turn into murder cases. I represented a lady, and she was the wife of the biggest bookie in Houston.
Really?
He literally had members of the Vice Squad on his payroll. And she was very concerned about her liability because they never paid income tax. And so another tax attorney and I advised her, you need to go back and file amended returns and report the income, the penalty and interest, and you're free. And I know she went home and told her husband that, the bookie, and 6 days later she was murdered in her house.
Wow.
And he eventually was tried for murder here in Houston, but the biggest piece of evidence they had, and his brother was the one that killed her. And there was a tape recording of he and his brother, and it was giving instructions about how to get in the house and all that. But what was in contention is that his voice. And so I testified in the criminal trial, but they had two 16-year-old twin daughters, and I knew that they were going to testify about this. And as I walked by the prosecutor's desk, I told him, I said, when those two girls testify and say, that's not my daddy's voice, this jury is not going to make them orphans.
Wow.
And so he got not guilty, ended up back in federal court at one point, and finally ended up pleading out to tax evasion and 14 years in prison. And the interesting thing, when all this was going on, after she was murdered and he moved around the corner from my house.
Really? Did you become buddies with him?
So
that's unbelievable. Okay, so that's crazy. So like, there's a big intersect between obviously family law and criminal law. Like you were.
Well, I had nothing to do with the criminal law except for the first time and only time in my life I appeared in front of a federal grand jury. And then when they were preparing for the trial before Bob skipped the country, they called me in for preparation, and I go to the federal courthouse, and there's two prosecutors, two paralegals, two secretaries, and the walls are lined with exhibits, trial outlines. And I will tell you, if you do not want the Department of Justice coming after you, because they are very thorough, and it was an impressive sight. And I was reminded of things I didn't remember about the case, and it was it was amazing the preparation that they do.
What kind of cases were you taking on, like when you were in the practice?
Well, I had an interesting practice. I did family law because of the Davis case.
Yeah,
that I talked about earlier.
Right.
I got all of a sudden, because Priscilla had been on the cover of People magazine. I mean, this was
really,
especially in Texas, was a well-known story. And so that got me in the divorce track. But at the same time, I like other cases. I mean, I tried will contest. I tried some commercial cases.
Okay.
And then I was hired as a medical malpractice defense lawyer by St. Luke's and Texas Children's Hospital, who are the two flagship hospitals of the Texas Medical Center. And the most interesting case I had with them was this lady claimed that she was recovering from back surgery. Mm-hmm. And she was getting back in bed after going to the bathroom, and she contended the hospital bed rolled out from under her, and she re-injured her back.
Okay.
When I wanted to take her deposition, her lawyer said, well, she's in such pain, she can't come downtown. We need to go to her house. So I go to her house, and she's in such pain, she's laying on the floor. And I already smelled rat. And so we took her video deposition, and she grimaced and groaned and all that. Well, I hired my private investigator, and the next day he started following her in her SUV, which she got in with no problem, to the supermarket, where 40 minutes later she came out with all these bags of groceries
Right.
and had no problem loading them in the car.
Right.
And so we pretty much proved she was a fraud. And I had a doctor who actually he was the orthopedist for the famous Houston Oilers, Earl Campbell, and he came in and testified with the X-rays in front of the jury that her injuries they were no different than when she was before her quote bed rollout at the hospital.
Really?
And as a further interest in that case, I did not care too much for her lawyer.
Okay.
I didn't think very much of his ethics, and several years after that case was over, he was criminally charged and convicted of tax evasion and disbarred by the State Bar of Texas.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That's wild. Okay. That's wild. So you were onto something with the guy, basically.
Well, most of the lawyers I dealt with, I could work with them with a handshake.
Right.
I didn't need a letter. I didn't need anything else. We practice law that way. But there are a few that I did not have that relationship with, and he was one of them.
So in your book, From Cotton Fields to Courtrooms, like you talk about delivering newspapers during a hurricane and like being a radio disc jockey because your dad bought a radio station, like that sort of thing. Like, did any of that, like, do you feel like, did they shape your skills to become a lawyer? I mean, I know they're not random jobs, but they're interesting jobs. And I think maybe like the radio, like talking on the radio, like helped you with your sort of like your speaking skills. Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, interesting. Well, one, as I've said, I love my radio time.
Yeah.
And it certainly proved fun for me in college because I was at the #1 station in Austin. I wanted to be a lawyer from the time I was a small child. And I remember I had an uncle ask me one time when I was 7 or 8 years old, he said, "Tommy, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be a lawyer." And he said, "Well, what do lawyers do?" And I said, "Uncle Dips, they help people." And so
why do you think you said that instead of, I'm just asking you because my son's going to be 7 January 1st. And I'm just wondering, like, why you think you were at 7 or 8 years old, you were like, well, I want to be a lawyer. And you said because they help people, but like, what made you think that?
I have no idea. I mean,
Okay.
I know my dad talked about that being a lawyer was a wonderful profession, and he had some friends who were lawyers who I admired, and so it stuck with me. And the only time I hesitated about law school, when I was leaving Austin to go to law school, I went into the program director's office and told him I was giving my notice that I was leaving to move from Austin to Houston. And he said, "Why do you want to do that? Because you have a great career in broadcasting." Because they were, was talking about getting into sales and management and owning my own stations. And but I thought when I was talking to him in my head, I said, I don't want to be a 40-year-old teeny bopper disc jockey.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you had high aspirations. I mean, not to say that people on the radio don't, but like there was something about it. I mean, I don't know, like you didn't have any lawyers in the family, right? Like, tell me about like the mentor situation.
Well, I mean, my dad was a very bright guy. In fact, he had gone to law school.
Oh, really? Okay.
At SMU, but it was during the Depression.
Okay.
And he did not have the money to complete law school. And I think a lot of my desire to be a lawyer was embedded from things that he would say to me.
Interesting.
Because he knew it was a great profession, and so that was what happened to me. I just was always there, and so I never had any hesitation. And coming to Houston, big city, and practicing law in Houston, Houston's the big leagues.
Right.
I mean, the trial lawyers here are exceptional. I met some great characters. Joe Jamel, who was the lawyer who represented Pennzoil and got $11 billion against Texaco and put him in bankruptcy. Jamel became one of my dear friends. And Houston's an exciting place to practice law because the quality lawyers here that are good, they are not good, they are excellent.
Right. So, and you went from UT, University of Texas, Hookham, to Houston, right? You went to law school in Houston, and then
and I will tell you what happened was I I wanted to stay in Austin. I applied to the University of Texas, and to be admitted, the combination of your grades in your law school had to be 1100.
Right.
I had 1085. I was 15 points
Right.
shy, and I did everything I could to get in the University of Texas, and I couldn't. And so I went to the dean of admissions, and he said, "You can get in any law school in this state." Well, actually, I told him, I said I'd had some hours from Texas Tech that would have put me over the 1100. And he said, "Oh, we don't accept Texas Tech grades because Texas is the university." So
Right.
he told me I could practice law anywhere. I mean, get in law school anywhere. And so he said, you want to practice in the Texas? And I said, yes. And he, without hesitation, he said, go to the University of Houston.
But hey, Tom, it worked out. You met Ann, right?
Yeah,
You met Ann
that's
there,
right.
You were at a party, which sound, it's interesting. We're in the holiday season. I was reading the passage about you being at a party and like you were with a buddy of yours, and you were like, he's like, you got to stop dating these girls that are sort of like,
well, no, the story is,
yeah. Being in the holiday season, I just imagine like some cool little holiday party or something, like.
Well, when I was at law school, the girls that I dated, you would not take home to mom. And so
that's what
my friend,
I won't ask you to describe those girls, okay?
My friend who grew up in Houston, and his father was head of radiology at Methodist Hospital, very well respected family. And Bob and I were together, and he said, Connor, if you're going to make it in Houston, you're going to have to date some nicer girls. And it just so happened I'd met this girl named Ann Garwood that night, and she was, quote, a nice girl.
Yep.
From a very, very fine family here. And we hit it off. And we're down our 51st year of marriage, so we've done something right.
God bless. Congratulations. My parents too, 51, 52. That's great.
Yeah, it's been quite a trip. And, and you talk about
let's go back to there for a second. Let's pause the moment in time. Like, it had to be fun because the way you talk about Texas, like, that your friend kind of had to alert you to the fact that like this young lady's like out at a party, but she's with a guy who's not her boyfriend, and like she's not happy. And then you meet her for a drink before she was going to like a dance or like a recital with her parent or mom. And then like you went on another dinner date, and then you spent the rest of your time together. And that had to be, that's mind blowing. That's not,
well, it was a whirlwind romance.
Right.
I called her for a drink or go to dinner.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I'll meet you for a drink, but it has to be early because I'm going to the opera with my mother.
Yeah.
Well, my West Texas brain could not calculate, that didn't calculate. So I called my buddy who introduced us, and he said, Connor, believe me, it's true.
Yeah.
So we met for a drink. 2 nights later, we had dinner. 3 nights later, we probably were together all the time. Yeah. And it took me 3 weeks to pop the question, though we rated
Did her parents like you? Do you remember, like her parent? I mean, you were at Houston. You're coming from like West Texas. Like, do you think?
Well,
like, how would that?
The honest question is, her dad had passed away.
Okay.
And her mother, she didn't like me, and and she was a very unusual woman. Even when I became successful, I think she even resented that. Because Ann and I were happy, and she was an unusual duck.
Okay. All right. No, it's interesting. Like, congratulations to you. Cause I think that's such a pivotal part of the story, because then, you go on to be like, you're like so successful. So, I mean, it just, like we hear at Lawyer Stories, I look at those pivotal moments, like you wanted to go to UT, you even go to the dean's office or wherever, you talk to him like, hey, 15 points below, like, how can I make this work? He's like, go to Houston. And you end up in this place where, you meet this woman, and then your career just sort of like takes off. Like, she teaches you things. You went shopping. She showed you like the shoes to buy.
Well,
right?
I mean, here I am. I'm a West Texas kid, and I wasn't totally, had cotton seed in my ears, but at the same time, I was wearing shiny Johnny Carson suits and boots or loafers. And she said, no, this isn't going to work. And so we went to Brooks Brothers, and we got wool suits and rep ties and white button-down shirts and cap-toed lace-up shoes.
Hope they had credit cards.
And all of a sudden, I looked like a lawyer. So
sounds expensive, though, Tom. All right, that's good. So like after decades in the courtroom, Like how are you personally defining justice? I know that's a big jump from what we're talking about, like, but what tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, justice, I know it when I see it. And
Right.
sometimes justice is difficult. Uh, I'll recount a story where I represent a judge that had been disbarred. And he was a very well-known probate judge. In fact, he rewrote the Texas probate code, and it was on the bench for 23 years. And
Okay.
he took a $5,000 contribution for the College of Probate Judges, for
Mm.
which he was president, and he kept the money because his son was in criminal trouble and he had to hire a criminal lawyer. And it was found out, and he was disbarred. He lost the bench. He spent a year in federal prison.
Yeah.
And he called me one day and he said, Top Cat, TC is my initials. He played off that. He said, I want to have lunch and I want you to represent me to get my law license back. And we tried the case before. You can't, it's not a jury trial, it's before a judge to
Right.
get your license back. And I had the dean, three of the probate lawyers in Houston who were the dean of the probate lawyers. I had a probate judge come in to testify that he should get his license back.
Okay.
There was even a probate judge from Michigan who flew down here on his own, not much. And the judge hearing my client, the judge was a Democrat, and the client hearing the case was a new Republican baby judge. And I knew it would be difficult.
Right.
And so at the conclusion of the case, I told my client, Judge Klein, I said, he doesn't have the cojones to give you your law license back.
Right.
And the judge hearing the case said, I will fax you my opinion in the morning. Well, I got back to the office 30 minutes later. The opinion was already there.
Really?
Our motion to state was denied.
Okay.
And so you asked me the question about justice. Well, this judge had every right in the world to do what he did, but I thought we had presented overwhelming evidence that my client, judge, should have gotten his law license back. So, you know, you like to think judges are fair and even-handed all the time, but in Texas, we elect our judges, and until recently, there were Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
And so if you had a Democrat at the top of the ticket in a presidential race, well, the lesser judges would be voted in as Democrats. And the same thing as Republicans, because we had straight ticket balloting, and a lot of people walk in and just hit Democrat, and everybody down the line, or Republican, everybody down the line would be voted for.
Right. So, Tom, I have a question for you. So I'm very curious. Like, what are the biggest changes? You practiced law for 45 years. What are the biggest changes that you witnessed in the legal profession over the time?
My biggest change is the quality of the judiciary that I saw.
Quality of the judiciary.
When I was a baby lawyer, these judges, of course, in my brain, they were old guys, but you know, they were steady. And the other thing is, at that time, when they got on the bench, once they got on, if let's say a judge dies in office and the governor appoints a new judge to that bench, and the next time he has to be elected, and he can be opposed and all that. But once they were elected, they were on the bench for life.
Right.
And it was only when we started getting these very partisan politics, the judges had to start campaigning, take money for contributions, and that damaged the judiciary. You know, if judges take contributions from lawyers, well, what happens when you go in the courtroom and, you know, you're the lawyer, you didn't give the judge any money, but your opponent gave him a lot of money or raised a lot of money, and he can make a decision that he can go either way and be correct. Well, you walk in the courtroom, and if you're the guy that didn't give money, then you've got a little concern about what's going to happen with your case. Yeah. And I'll also say, in a more answer to your question, the other thing I witnessed, I mentioned earlier, I had lawyers, when I had a handshake with them, I knew I had nothing to worry about. We had a deal. And in later years, the lawyers like that were getting fewer and fewer. And in fact, I've talked to some of my colleagues who are still actively practicing, and they bemoan the fact that, you know, the lawyers are what we call Rambo lawyers. They're you can't reason with them. They want to, you know, if they want to fight, and That was not the way that we did. Most of the lawyers I dealt with, we didn't want to go to trial. We wanted to settle the case and do it correctly for our
Yeah.
clients.
Right.
Because if any client said, I want to go to trial, you had a client that was crazy.
Right. Right.
So,
Because you never they know, like they might lose out on something too, like some of the money or like whatnot that you couldn't obtain in a settlement or in
I
trial.
said, I want to go to trial.
Yeah.
We had to go to trial because we couldn't resolve things.
Right.
But I
So
will say that. I will
yeah.
say this. Go ahead, Ben. I'm sorry.
No, I had down in my notes like what I thought was kind of cool, like back to law school, like your moment of getting called on, and I think like the famous case of Sherwood v. Walker, 1887, like the cow case, mutual agreement contract case. With that you got called on?
It was Rosie the cow.
Rosie, so like looking
The
back
case was
on it,
everybody in contracts.
looking
Rosie the
back on
cow.
it, like what an honor to be called on for such a epic known case, right? Not at the time.
Well, no, it was not an honor.
Not at the time. I know.
The professor's name was his name was Eliezer Early,
Right.
and he was an original Israeli freedom fighter,
Right.
and he was tough. And he called me on Rosie the cow, and I recited, and I thought I'd done a wonderful job reciting. And the first thing he says in this thick accent, Mr. Corner, your problem is you think like a student. You don't think like a lawyer.
I know. Oh,
And
gosh.
so when I took the contracts exam, and I made the second highest grade in the class. So
that's amazing. I read that you did they like to make you think you're not doing well, but then you actually do well. So give me some advice. What traits do you believe every young lawyer should develop early if they want a long, respected career?
be honest.
Be honest. I like it.
It's very simple. Your word is your bond. If you tell a lawyer something, you tell a judge something, you better be honest. And you know, unlike some of the things we do have today, that lawyers are going to courtroom representing the government, lying to the judge. That's not how you succeed.
Right.
And you know, and a reputation is a difficult thing to acquire, and it can be lost in an instant.
Yeah. So, who are your most influential mentors or figures in your legal career? You know, and how did they shape you to become the lawyer that you are?
Probably the mentor that meant the most to me was a judge named Peter Solito.
Okay.
And he became a mentor, a dear friend, and he started out, he was a criminal district judge, a family law district judge, then a civil district judge, and then he became the presiding judge for the 67 district courts in Houston. And when I was, as a baby lawyer, I was trying a case in front of him, and I made an objection, and he sustained it. And then I kept arguing.
Okay.
And he looked at me and he said, "Counsel, if the court rules for you, it's time for you to sit down." And a couple of members of the jury I heard chuckled. So, you know, Pete would do things like that, and we became great friends. And he was an important person in my life.
Okay. That's interesting.
And I'll be frank with you, I had a lot of other older lawyers who did a lot of things for me and taught me a lot.
Right.
And you know, I think early before we were talking, I remember an old lawyer telling me, "You remember the dullest pencil is better than the sharpest mind."
Right.
And you know, I'd hear things like that, and they influenced me. But the thing that the good lawyers taught me, you know, one, work hard, do your best representing your clients, and if you don't do that, because you know, as you probably know from your talks, if you're a lawyer, it's not unusual that you work 10 hours a day and maybe you're there on Saturday. You know, when I was getting ready for trial, you know, figuring out voir dire and the whole thing about, the other thing I'll comment about, you don't win cases in trial. You win them in preparation.
Right.
When you go into trial, you've got your exhibit notebooks, you've got your witness outlines, your voir dire outline, you're ready to go. And that's what wins cases.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of trials, like Your book gives us like a behind the scenes look at high profile trials. So what's one courtroom moment the public like almost never gets to see?
Well, I think what the public never gets to see is you don't know what a jury is going to do, and you sit there in the time you're the most nervous in court is not during the trial. It's while that jury is deliberating.
Right.
And they send notes out to the judge, and you see this, the judge reads this note to you, and you try to figure out what in the world are they talking about. You're trying to guess, okay, this note, what does it mean? And you may be right, you may be wrong. But and sometimes, sometimes you're going to win. I had a case in Galveston against a very flamboyant lawyer, but his ego overtook him in the courtroom, and it was a custody case which we prevailed in, and most cases when the jury comes out, the case is over, the jury wants to talk to the lawyers. A lot of times they want to talk.
Oh, really? Okay.
The jury comes out after this verdict, and my opposing counsel's walking up, and the foreman of the jury says, "Mr. Jones, we just want to talk to Mr. Connor." And as he walked away, one of the jurors says, "How come he's so crazy?" I mean, he'd been such a complete buffoon. And that's one of the cases that when the jury went out, I felt pretty good. I thought, I'm going to win this one.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you've had really like powerful adversaries, like with betrayal, enormous stakes. Like, how do you mentally prepare for those things, like emotionally and like the different situations? How do you do that? What's your experience?
I'll be honest with you. We all put our pants on one leg at a time, and I was never really intimidated by the lawyers on the other side. In fact, I generally would make friends with them. They'd become my friends. Jamel's a perfect example. The case that I had with him, we were on opposite sides, and we became great friends.
Right.
And of all the lawyers that I dealt with, Jamel could be the toughest, because he would do stuff that would just, I'll give you an example. Joe was waiting to hear an appellant argument in the case that I was involved with him on, and a Dallas lawyer just flew in to observe the argument.
Right.
And I'm sorry, Jamel was there to observe the argument, and the lawyer from Dallas had a backpack on. And Jamel told him, said, "If you know what part of your anatomy I'm coming after, you're going to lower that backpack."
Okay. Wow.
And this is Joe was telling him he was going to kick his butt. So,
yeah. Okay. I got it.
And that's a typical Jamel.
Wow.
I don't know. In one of the cases, this fellow claimed to be an Italian baron, and he was not.
Right.
And Jamel was taking his deposition, and he says, and he called him Enrico, which was his first name.
Mm.
And Enrico says, "I would appreciate it if you'd call me Baron." And
Right.
Joe says, "I'm an American. I'll call you asshole if you want me to."
Wow. Okay.
And
That's so nice. So
that's Jamel.
wow. We talked about the Cullen Davis murder case. It remains one of the most sensational trials in Texas history. Like, what do you think about the case captivated the nation? And what stays with you today about it?
Well, I'll talk about the interesting thing. When they moved the murder case from Fort Worth to Amarillo and the change of venue, one time one guy said, "Well, it's a perfect place because in Amarillo, they send their daughters east to be educated and keep their sons at home to learn to be bastards like their daddies."
Wow.
And so that's a perfect place to try Cullen Davis.
Wow. Okay. So what do you think captivated everybody about that case?
Well, because Cullen was so wealthy, and he was obviously guilty.
Yeah.
But he got him not guilty because Racehorse Haynes tried Priscilla, and one of the prosecutors in the case, he said, I didn't never think this, but I do now. There's one system of justice for the rich and another system for the poor.
You have a chapter called "The Worst Day of My Law Practice."
We had a law clerk that for 2 years, and we liked him, and we hired him as an associate. And our safety deposit box had a $500,000 Exxon stock certificate we were holding for a client. And only my office manager and I had the keys to get it, or the ability to get in the box. And this young associate came to her, and we settled the case. So I go to my office manager and I said, we need to get that stock certificate out for the client. And she looks like somebody just hit her. She said, well, Clement came in 5 months ago and said you wanted that certificate, and I went with him and got it out of the box. Turned out he got it cashed. He bought a beach house in Galveston. And so we eventually, it was interesting because when he was finally arrested, I'd run into a lady who I knew from past trials, and she said, well, I run the county jail now. And I told him about Clement. And when he was arrested, she said, I'm going to make sure he's put in general population.
Wow.
Well, Clement was an overweight, effeminate young man, and general population in the Harris County Jail was the last place that he would want to be.
Right.
And the next time I saw him 4 months later, he had lost about 50 pounds, had bags under his eyes, and he looked alarmingly sad.
Yeah.
We eventually got him disbarred, and he was pled out for the time he served in jail. And 25 years later, I look in the paper, and a hospital administrator is indicted for theft from the hospital. Well, it's him. He became a purchasing manager and formed dummy corporations and sent bills to Methodist Hospital.
Wow.
And paid himself $2 million.
Wow, that's
so
crazy.
That leopard didn't change lots.
No, that's wild. But the client, at least whose stock certificate that was you said was cordial, right? He understood. And
oh no, the client was, that was a hard, one of the hardest calls I ever made was to call this client. He was a former trustee at Rice University and a very successful business certificate. Thankfully, we had all our employees bonded, and we made him whole within a matter of a few weeks. But it was an unpleasant experience.
Yeah, no, totally. So tell us now, Tom, like, why did you decide this was the right time to write From Cotton Fields to Courtrooms?
I'm sitting in my office in Santa Fe, and I start writing some of my life stuff for my children. And so I started writing it, and my high school girlfriend, who now lives in Boston, is a published author. And I started sending her some of this stuff, and she said, you have a wonderful writer's voice. You have to finish this.
Yeah.
And actually, I give her a lot of credit that she encouraged me. If I'd get cold writing the book, she said, no, get back and finish this book. And so I did. And then I hired a very good editor, and which, it surprised me. The editor started, and I don't think he was patting me on the back. He said, we edit a lot of books. And he said, the three of us that are edited up here, we've been reading your book, and we really like your book, and we think it'll be successful. So I got encouragement along the way, and that's why I did it. And it took me 5 years. It's kind of fun because I got in the habit of writing. And since this book has been put to bed, I've written another 3 stories about some other
Really?
that I've
That's
had.
amazing.
Yeah. And I'll put them on my blog as soon as my website's up, which will
nice.
as of when this show is broadcast, the website will be up, tomconnorbooks.com, and Connor is with an ER, tomconnorbooks.com.
Yeah, I definitely want to see that. So yeah, congratulations. It's how's your family doing? How are your kids and everybody?
Well, everybody's good. The part of the things that I think when they talk about hardship is my daughter, now 47, when she was 19, she was paralyzed.
Right.
And she's very successful. She's completed law school. She's the number 3 person at Goodwill Industries, 1,500 employees, 40 stores. But the thing of the story about Emily is because of her, we started a research for spinal cord injury. We started with 3 schools and 3 scientists. It's now grown to 20 institutions, 150 scientists working on spinal cord and traumatic brain injury. And so it's a very successful thing. And it all got started because of Emily. Yeah. And because when the when the chairman of the board of the hospital walked into her room and said, "I have a dream that we'll cure spinal cord injuries."
Right.
And he had 3 schools and 3 scientists, and he said, "We need to raise $1 million." And
Yeah.
Emily said, laying in bed, said, "My family will do that."
Yeah.
And we did.
Yeah.
And that's how the Mission Connect got started, which is now worldwide known in the scientific community.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to connect with her too about her story at some point. That'd be great if she's up for it. Just like, I'll just, maybe drop her an email or something. So tell me, like, give me just some like life advice, looking back, like, you've had like such an awesome, like kind of cool career, like good law school career, good parents, good family. Like, give me some like catch-all advice.
Well, Ben, I'm not that good. I've got to drain my brain with advice because I always go back to be honest and do the best you can.
Do the best you can. I think
that's all you can never be in life.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would tell anybody, not just lawyers, but anybody in their life. If you can't be trusted, you'll go downhill real quick.
Yeah. No, I think that's big. I mean, you want to be trusted by people. I think that's a great thing. What do you hope readers like walk away from your book with?
Well, I hope they walk away with some lessons learned from things that we've talked about earlier in the podcast. I hope they walk away with the book thinking, this guy had a pretty interesting life, and I enjoyed reading about it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I did. I think it's really cool because I'm from the Northeast, and I think it's kind of cool, like reading about stuff that people in like Texas and like West Texas, and very, very interesting. And it's been an honor and a pleasure. Like, is there anything else that we've left out today that you want to discuss?
Well, I will tell you one little vignette.
Yeah.
I represented a lot of the oil men in the Permian Basin, which is 86,000 miles of oil-rich land.
Wow.
And they are interesting guys. And I had one of them on the phone one day, and he said, "Who are the Texas Rangers playing tonight?" And that's talking about the ball team in Dallas-Fort Worth. And he's in Midland. And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to my secretary." And in the background, I hear her say, "The Yankees." And the next thing he says is, "Call the pilot. We're going to the game tonight."
Really? Okay. Are you a big sports fan or no?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. If the University of Texas is playing football, I'll be watching it.
Okay. Good.
Once you go to UT, you still have orange blood. So
Arch Manning, hook 'em, go Texas.
Anyway.
Yeah. And so, well, I really appreciate you coming on.
That's right.
And, it's great to connect with you, and I hope we'll stay in touch. And
thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to your book, getting an autographed copy to have in my little studio here.
Well, you're going to get it, and I'm happy to get it to you.
All right. Well, you got my email, Tom, and I appreciate it again. Thanks for coming on. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in wherever you are in the world today. Enjoy yourself. Tom, stay right there, okay?